Hey there everyone, it's Nina Marie. Thanks for joining me today for another video. Today's project's a little bit different. I'm not making a card. Instead, I'm going to be creating this little reliquary dome using some Tim Holtz stamps and some brand new Simon Says stamp coordinating dies that match these stamps. So there are a whole bunch of new coordinating dies from Simon Says stamp that will match up with some of your absolute favorites from Tim Holtz. There are 6 different stamp sets that have coordinating dies now, in addition to all the other Simon Says stamp coordinating dies that match up with Tim's stamps. So there's more to add to the collection, which is really fun. You can find links to the new release of Simon Says stamp coordinating dies down in the video description and over on my blog. Now today's video, I'm going to be using the Flutter stamp set along with the coordinating Flutter dies. And like I said, I'm not going to make a card. I wanted to make something that you could put in your home or your craft space as something fun and inspiring. So this is the Flutter stamp set, and it's got a bunch of beautiful detailed butterflies on it. And then the coordinating dies for the Flutter stamp set cut out each one of these butterflies in very great detail. So I'm going to stamp my butterflies with 2 different shades of ink to get a shaded effect. So I'm going to start first with lilac ink from Simon Says stamp. This is a nice light purple. And I'm going to stamp this onto the white cardstock that I'm using, which is Simon Says stamp 120 pound white cardstock. I want to get a base color down before I bring in another shade of ink. This time I'm using Galaxy. Now this isn't part of the trio that the lilac or Galaxy come with, but I really liked the mix that these 2 purples provide. And you'll notice I'm using ink cubes today instead of larger ink pads. I find that for a stamp shading technique like this, I prefer the smaller ink cube. Now I'm also taking my blending brush and just kind of feathering out some of that really dark area as it meets up with the lighter, just to get a softer transition. But I'm going to show you with another round of stamping that you don't have to do that. It's just an option. I'm going to clean off my stamp with my Lawn Fawn stamp chamois, and then I'm going to take the coordinating die for this butterfly, line it up over top of the image, and then go ahead and cut this out with my die cut machine. Now I'm going to hold this down with a bit of tape just to make sure that it doesn't shift as I run it through my die cutting machine, because I want to make sure I get a really good cut. Alright, now I'm going to show you another round of stamping here. Again, we're going to use the ink cubes. I'm using Cadet now to create the first layer of color, and I'm just going to do the same thing, add a base coat of ink down on my paper so that I can start bringing in the darker color to create the blend. To create my blend, I'm going to bring in Royal. This is actually part of the trio that the Cadet and Royal are from. These are the coordinating colors. So that's going to blend really nicely together, and as you can see, I did not feather this one out. I'm just trying to show you that you have 2 options for how you could do this technique. If you want to go through the extra step of creating that feathering, you can totally do that and get a really nice smooth transition. But it still works just as well if you don't do the feathering. So now I'm going to take a couple of Copic markers that I felt matched nicely with the colors that I'm using for my stamping, and I'm just going to fill in the white areas. I want these butterflies to be solid color, so that way I get some really nice pops of color inside of my reliquary dome. And then I'm taking a black pen and I'm going to trace over the center body of the butterfly as well as his antennas. I just wanted those to stand out a little bit more and have some contrast, so that black looks really good. Then I'm going to take a bit of glossy accents, and because this dries clear, this is going to be perfect for adding a little bit of sparkle over top of the tips of my butterfly's wings. So I'm just putting this in a sketchy format over top of my butterfly, not going all the way to the center. I just want it along the outer edges, and that's going to allow me to sprinkle on some distressed clear rock candy for that bit of sparkle and shine. I want to add some additional sparkle to my butterflies, so I'm going to take the coordinating die for the butterflies that I'm using today and cut them from not only a glitter cardstock but also a solid colored cardstock that matches with the colors of ink that I've chosen. So for this butterfly, I used blue shades. I'm also going to bring in some wire. It doesn't really matter what kind of wire you use as long as it can hold its shape. So you want something that has a little bit of a stiffer gauge. I'm going to wrap this around a pencil or paintbrush, whatever works for you, just a couple times to get some swirls. Then that's going to allow me to glue this to my butterfly, which is going to form a delicate little stick that the butterfly can flutter from, which I think is really fun. So this, I'm just adhering to my butterfly with a bit of hot glue. I'm just kind of running it through to sandwich it in between the glue. Let that cool a second so it has a chance to adhere. And now I have this little bit of wire strung from the butterfly. Now I need to actually adhere these other colored pieces to my butterfly. So the idea is I want to have some color behind the butterfly's wings just to add some interest and dimension to it and make it feel like it's fluttering. And I also want the back side of my butterflies to have some color so that they're not white, because you are going to be able to see the butterflies from all angles inside of the dome. So I'm going to use foam squares to help me pop up these little butterfly outlines onto my main butterfly image. And I'm also shaping them as I put these down just to give them some lift off of each other and give that fluttering dimension. But I always use the solid piece behind my stack of elements here to have that solid color behind the butterfly, so that way when you see it from the backside, it's not white. So as you can see, I have my trio of butterflies here and we're ready to start working on our dome. So I'm going to cut some green glitter cardstock from a circle die that is pretty close to the same size as the Reliquary dome base. So I'm going to glue this to the top of that base, and then I'm just going to use my scissors to trim up any excess, just to get it nice and flush against the edge. And I'll also clean this up with a little bit of some emery board to be able to give it a softer finish. But before I do that, I need to glue this to my base, so I'm just using some hot glue to help me attach that glitter cardstock piece onto the base. We're going to color the sides too to blend it all in. So here I'm going to take that emery board and I'm just going to go around the edges of this cardstock to soften that edge out. So that way it's flush to the edge of our Reliquary dome base. I'm going to paint that base with some paint. I pulled out Distress paint in Lucky Clover, and I'm going to just brush this along the edges of the cork to match up that color pretty well to the glitter cardstock that I used, which is from Simon's Stamp. I'm going to paint the entire edge all the way around, and I'm going to go over it a couple of times to make sure I get a really good coverage. I want to make sure that all areas of that cork are completely covered with the green. Once that dried, then I can start working on attaching my butterflies to it. I'm using a craft pick from Tim Holtz to start my holes into the cardstock, so that way I don't bend my wire. So that way that's going to puncture a small hole that I can then feed the wire into, and I'm going to trim the wire as needed to get the height that I want for my project. I want the large purple butterfly to be the tallest, but then the other two butterflies that are blue, those are going to be a little bit shorter. As you can see, one of them is going on the back side and it's going to add some color and interest to the back side of the scene, so that way it's got something interesting to look at. It's not plain. The wire is very easy to cut. This wire that I'm using is just some simple beading wire that I had in my stash, and it cuts really easily with some die snips. Then I can just finish feeding each of these butterflies into place. I made sure that the height was going to work with inside of my dome, so that way they wouldn't get squished. I want to fill in the base of my dome with a little bit more interest. So I'm using some of these clear droplets from Tim Holtz. These are gorgeous and are such a fun accent. You could color them, of course, but I decided to leave them clear so that way you would see it reflect the beautiful sparkle green color that we have along the ground. So I filled that in with some hot glue and those little glass balls. And then now I'm bringing in a bit of moss that I can tuck around some of these pieces. This just fills things in a little bit and also adds some texture. It gives you that really nice botanical feel here. And I'm just adhering this with a bit of craft tacky glue. This glue does dry clear, so I'm not worried about any glue that you might see squishing around the edges. Now at this point, I'm ready to put the dome on top. So I'm just going to start carefully feeding my butterflies into it. And they're not really going to move that much inside of this dome because they do fill it really well, but they look so cool suspended from that wire, and then they fill the entire scene here beautifully. So I'm just carefully tucking all of my little moss pieces back into place as I put the dome down. I do want to adhere it a little bit on the back side just to make sure that the dome doesn't fall off. So I put a little line of glossy accents along the back side of the dome so that way it could adhere to that, and that'll just give it a little bit of a more tighter close. So now I'm going to bring in one of my favorite Tim Holtz die sets. This is from the Vault Boutique, and it has some really great imagery in it. But one of my favorite pieces are the little delicate butterflies. These are solid butterflies, but they're fantastic for adding as little embellishments to different things. So I'm going to adhere these to the outside of my dome, and I'm cutting them from a couple of different glitter cardstock colors that I thought matched nicely with the shades that I used for my butterflies that are inside the dome. So I'm gluing these to the outside with craft tacky glue. Craft tacky glue is fantastic for adhering all sorts of different things, including paper, to unique surfaces like glass. So I'm going to use that to help me adhere these butterflies into place. I'm trying to create a trail here, so I've got quite a few of them clustered on the left side, and then they kind of meet up with the butterflies in the middle. I give a little bit of a break, and then the rest of them are going to be cascading along the top right, which I think looks really cool. It kind of looks like these butterflies are fluttering around with the big ones. On the outside of my Reliquary dome, I'm going to put this little lucky charm on it. This is one of Tim Holtz's quote tags, and I love this. It's so cute. It's small and fits perfectly on the front of my Reliquary dome. So I'm just going to color it with a bit of foundry wax to give it a gold finish instead of the pewter. I applied that with my finger and then just used my heat tool to set it. It kind of works like embossing powder, where it kind of gets that really nice shine. After a few seconds of applying heat, you'll see that turn from a matte finish to a really beautiful metallic shine. So here is our cute little lucky. I am going to distress it a little bit with a crayon. I have a Tim Holtz Distress crayon here in Scorched Timber, and this is going to allow me to smear some of this into some of the nooks and crannies, which are going to do two things. One, it's going to give it a distressed worn feel, which I love, but it's also going to give some relief to this piece, because that's going to make the letters stand out. This is going inside of all the recessed areas. And then the dimensional letters are not going to have the crayon on them, and so those are going to stay gold. So it gives this a very cool 3D finish, and I love it. It's got a lot of relief to it. I'm going to glue this onto my dome with some hot glue, so just a quick little squirt, and then I will set this along the bottom of the dome, right in the center. I also wanted to accent it with a couple pieces of hardware, so I pulled out my Tim Holtz hardware set, and I left those the pewter color, but I did add a little bit of distressed crayon to them to give them a slightly worn, almost kind of like a aged bronze finish, which looks really nice. And so I glued those directly onto the dome with my hot glue. I'm almost done, but at this point I wanted to add a little bit more shine and kind of that magical fairy tale finish to this project. So I'm pulling in some Opal Dazzling gems from Simon Says Stamp, and these are the perfect mystical colored gem. So I'm going to put them onto my dome using the craft tacky glue, and I'm using the smaller ones so that I can put those around my butterflies to create that really pretty dewdrop trail, which I think looks so good. And then that is going to complete my dome project, which I am so excited with how it turned out. It looks so cool with all of the fun details inside the dome with the butterflies, and then we added some accents on the outside with those cute little die-cut butterflies, the gems. But all of this was made possible by having the coordinating dies for the Flutter stamp set. I was able to cut these butterflies out beautifully, layer them up with a bunch of other die cuts to create that 3D dimensional effect for them. And all in all, it's a beautiful way to create a fun decor piece for either inside your home or in your craft room or as a gift to someone. So I hope you enjoyed seeing this project come together. I know it's not a card and it's a little bit different, but I hope it inspired you and that you'll try out some of the ideas that I've shared today in your next crafting project. So thanks so much for watching this video. I appreciate it so very much. Please be sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. I'd love to have you be a subscriber, and tune in for all of my other crafty episodes. And if you're interested in the Tim Holtz coordinating dies from Simon Says Stamp, they are exclusively designed by Simon Says Stamp and only available at simonsaystamp.com. You can find them down in the video description and over on my blog. I also have links to all the other products that I used today, so if you were curious about anything, you can find it all there. Until next time, friends, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will be seeing you again very soon.